To be honest, I'm not particularly a fan of Formula 2. I don't usually follow it, but well, I don't really like Kiwis either, and that doesn't stop me from trying them every now and then. So, the folks at VRC have released a Formula 2 mod, and when VRC puts out a mod, I just shut up, sit back, and nod my head gently.
Because yes, these people for me are probably the best modding development team. They will be there with Racing Studio, who are also a very competent team, but in terms of motorsport, they are the best.
And simply this mod is just another proof of that. But Lekwas, let's not waste any more time and get right into talking about this amazing Formula 2 mod from VRC that you'll already be seeing on screen. And right off the bat, I have to say it looks spectacular, it looks incredible. Obviously, in a car mod, appearances are probably the least important thing, which, hey, they are important too, let's not pretend they're not, but it's true that what matters in this case is also what's on the inside.
Of course, in the end, it's all about how the car feels, what feelings does it give you, the feedback, but you know, I have to say it.
Aesthetically, it's really nice, it looks super pretty, and the first thing to mention is that we're talking about a mod of the Formula 2 from the 2024 season. We don't have the 2025 one yet, but the main characteristic of this car,
comparing to Formula 1,
is that we're dealing with a car that is, of course, aerodynamically much simpler.
I wouldn't go too deep into the aerodynamics of this Formula 2 because, as I said, I don't follow the category, so I'm not very informed about it. What we can say is that the main difference with Formula 1 is that this Formula 2, unlike Formula 1, doesn't have the hybrid system. We're talking about a V6 engine like the Formula 1, 3.4 liters, turbocharged, which actually match exactly with the engine specification list on the Formula 2 website, so that's perfect. Well, this mod has something special. The folks at VRC developed this mod in collaboration with the driver, in fact a race winner in Formula 2, Zack O'Sullivan, and who has collaborated in the development of this mod.
I guess I don't even need to say how important this is for giving credibility to this mod. I mean, the folks at WRC always do really good stuff, but what's clear is that when you have someone who has actually driven that car, especially in a top-level competition context like Formula 2, it's undoubtedly the best feedback you can get. Because obviously Zach's opinions must have contributed a lot to make the gaming experience with this car extremely realistic. And surely getting feedback and responses from the car that are much closer to reality than what we could have without a Formula 2 driver collaborating, right? Which of course will never be the same as the real experience, that's for sure, but I think it's something very important to keep in mind. Another very interesting detail is that this mod has a system that differentiates between realistic mode and simple mode. And this system affects three specific aspects of the car, which are the following:
the starting system, the anti-stall system, and DRS system.
This is just my speculation, but maybe this is something from Zack O'Sullivan. I mean, maybe he told them things that the Formula 2 has that they didn't know about, and now they've implemented it. But hey, this is totally my speculation. I don't know if it's like that or not.
So, how does having the realistic mode or the simple mode affect?
You're going to have the option of the starter button available all the time, while in realistic mode, the car needs, let's say, an external starter, I suppose from a mechanic or something, and it can't be reset. That is to say, if you leave the pit lane, have some problem, an accident, and get stranded, you won't be able to start the car. This is in realistic mode. As I said, in simple mode, you'll be able to start it anywhere without needing that external starter. In the second section, the anti-stall system also has the two options. In simple mode, the anti-stall system will work
in all gears,
while in realistic mode, the system will only work in first gear or in reverse gear. And it's really good because if the engine revs drop too much in high gears and you don't engage the clutch in time, the car is going to stall. It's going to stall the car, forcing you to go back to the pits. This is designed for people who clearly know how to handle the car, because someone who isn't used to driving this, if they switch to realistic mode, they're only going to last 2 minutes because they're going to be completely overwhelmed. And the third one, and for me the most incredible of the three, is the activation of the DRS. Because yes, in simple mode, the DRS activation is the classic one, the one we are used to. When you reach the zone, you press the button, the DRS opens, and when you brake, it closes automatically. But in realistic mode, you can press the DRS button even before you get to the zone, and the DRS will open automatically as soon as you reach the DRS zone.
But that's not all, because here comes the funny part. To keep the DRS open, you have to keep the button pressed. If you stop to pressing it, or if you brake, the DRS deactivates. And honestly, this is one of the things that made me think that this is the work of the driver, Zack O'Sullivan, because really it's an extremely complex system and very different from what we are used to. And obviously this is speculation, but I think maybe Sullivan has said, this system is like this. I don't know if it will also be the same in Formula 1, just because it is like this in Formula 2 doesn't mean it has to be like this in Formula 1. Sometimes there are things that coincide, but not everything is like this. In any case, I find it super interesting. It's one of the details that has caught my attention the most in the mod, but by no means the only one. One thing I have not said is that this mod has a version of the normal car, and is much simpler and more direct like any car you can find in Assetto Corsa. So don't worry if anyone wants to play the mod, but it's a bit scared of seeing all this stuff that has to be done. Don't worry, there is always the option of the normal car without CSP, which is completely simple. And that's it. Another interesting detail is the issue with the car's floor. Because we have a regulation in place where if you exceed or go over that 1mm in any of the areas that are going to be checked, you will be violating the regulations, and therefore your laps will be cancelled. I understand that if you're in a race, well, I don't know, you get disqualified or some kind of penalty, right?
And also, the floor can only be replaced during practice sessions, meaning if you enter qualifying and races, that's it. You can't change it anymore.
Obviously, the steering wheel also has its thing. You have a display with up to 6 pound difference options, in which you will have different information about the car.
Tire temperatures, pressures, an overview of the car, your brake balance, pedals, and so on. Lots of things you can see on this display. It's something that the folks at VRC really take care of, and they always implement it very well.
Now I want to share something that happened to me.
Because at first I was testing the car at the Silverstone circuit with the CSP model, and I was finding that the car was absolutely undrivable. At first I was thinking, well, cold tires and all that, but there came a point where I had done many laps and there was just no way. When I suddenly realized that my tires were leaving the pits at 5 degrees, this is because I had set up a real metrology system. I don't know what I had done at Silverstone back then. It was cloudy, and of course the temperature was really low.
But how did I realize this?
Well, because I switched cars, I changed from the CSP car to the normal car, which I've already mentioned is the simpler one, and the normal car did leave the pit lane with the correct temperatures.
And I said, this is what's going on. So I simply changed it.
That you have to warm up the tires for a couple of laps. And that's the first thing I want to mention, by the way, about the driving sensations. It's super sensitive. That's one of the things that has caught my attention the most. Formula 1 was also sensitive, obviously, to tire warming, which is a very important thing in Formula 1, isn't it? But in this Formula 2, if possible, I have noticed it even more. The extreme sensitivity. How important it is to warm up the tires, the fact that doing a good warm-up or not doing it can determine whether you can do a good lap. And the issue of tire temperatures has seemed incredible to me. Super sensitive. You can't even imagine. And not just the temperatures, but also the brakes. I had to make an extra effort to warm up the brakes and tires during that out lap. Because really, if you try to do a full-on flying lap with the tires not in an optimal temperature range, the car is completely out of control. Because, in fact, now we're going to move on to the second point, which I also found super interesting. I don't know if I actually had the floor plate very low, because there's a bump at the exit of Cops that I was feeling really strongly all the time. In fact, well, the car would lift momentarily, and I was thinking, well, am I heading straight for the wall or what? So, well, I don't know if I actually had the floor plate very low and needed to raise it. Look, I really didn't care because I wasn't doing any Grand Prix or anything. I don't care about going over the limit, but it's true that that gap was giving me a lot of problems. I also don't know if it's a matter of this specific circuit having a bump that you're definitely going to notice because I haven't raced that many times in Assetto Corsa at Silverstone, to be honest.
And if I've said that the topic of temperatures, heating, and so on is a sensitive issue,
I must say that aerodynamically, it is extremely sensitive.
I mean, the car feels very unstable in the middle of the corner, but we're talking a bit about medium high-speed corners.
Because in slow corners, what I notice is that the car struggles to enter the corner, meaning it understeers. Very different behavior from that. In that medium-high speed corner, what happens is that the car is unstable. It's not that the car is a tractor that doesn't enter the corner. The feeling is that in this type of medium-high speed corner, if you put in more steering wheel than necessary, you are completely out. And a very clear example of all this is precisely turn 3. I think it's turn 3 at Silverstone because it's a slow corner, and I was constantly observing that it was very difficult for me to get the car into the corner there. However, later on in the medium and high speed corners, the behavior was almost the opposite. And in fact, I fiddled a bit with the setup. I mean, I didn't go too deep into it because I wasn't going to set any kind of time or anything like that, but I did try to have a slightly more stable car, and it's true that by tweaking a bit I reduced that effect. But I do have to say one thing, and it's that the car's manual states that this is a natural characteristic of the car, which I also found quite interesting. So the fact that the car is unstable in those medium and high speed corners, while in the slow corner he is more clumsy, it is a natural characteristic. You can reduce it a bit by changing the setup, but you'll never eliminate it completely. Another detail is the exit, which is quite critical. The exit, I mean the moment of starting the corner, I found it even more critical than in Formula 1, And I want you to see my first start with this car, and I want you to see how it went. Yes, and this has a certain explanation that in fact I understood later when I read the manual and saw one thing. Of course I didn't know it was like that. And this happened because when you put the car into first gear at startup, the throttle map is changed so that 50% of the pedal pressure you apply on the accelerator equals 100% of the engine's power, which in this case would be more like the torque itself. And this procedure is automatically deactivated when you reach 120 kilometers per hour. What does this mean? At the start, when you're in first gear, if you press 50% of the throttle, the car will respond as if you were pressing 100%. So, of course, I didn't know that, and I started to press the pedal, well, normally, as if the system wasn't implemented. So, of course, I ended up spinning out for that reason. But I do have to say that in terms of traction, when exiting slow corners at low speed, when I tried to put the gas down while heading into a straight, this car was especially uncontrollable. And I say, damn, the Formula 1 car has more power in the end. This car has a power of, according to the development team, it has a power of 620 horsepower, while in Formula 1, we're talking about 1000 horsepower. But it really didn't surprise me that much, because here, we're talking about getting traction from a very low speed, or even from a standstill, where what comes into play isn't the power, but the torque. And surprisingly, the mod captures something super interesting. Look here, you're seeing the graph of Formula 2. The torque is the yellow line, and the power is the red one. And here on the right, you have the one from Formula 1. Obviously, the power is much higher in Formula 1, but the torque is very similar in both cases. But it's much more pronounced at the start in the Formula 2, and if it's included here, it's because the people at VRC have implemented it. I find that incredible, and among other things, it's for reasons like this that I think it's a spectacular development team. The downside is that it's a very sensitive car. It's a very sensitive car in general. I also have to take into account that I haven't driven a Formula 1 car in a while. I tested it, I've played it several times, but it's true that I don't have it that fresh in my mind. But I do have the first impressions that I got from both of them, more or less. But well, as for the setup, there is not much to say. It is a much simpler setup than that of Formula 1. In the end, it also makes sense. We are talking about a car that in itself is simpler. A brake distribution that is also normal. It doesn't have as much complexity as in Formula 1, which we saw back in the day. As for the sound, I'm not going to say it's extremely realistic because, as I said, I don't follow Formula 2 either, and I don't know how it sounds like, for example, a Formula 1 car, which I'm really tired of hearing. But what I can say is that it sounds absolutely amazing. I don't know if it's realistic or not, but it sounds incredible. And in fact, you can modify it. There's a section in the settings that has a ton of options for a lot of things. One is the sound, and it's also customizable. In fact, the manual includes some presets that are supposed to be good by default. I haven't really changed anything, but it already sounded good without altering anything. Aside from all these, I wanted to do a race to close the video with a little race testing it and such, but it was impossible for me. There was no way to have a somewhat normal race, so in the end I said, you know what, I'll just leave the video with my explanations of what I thought and what it contains, and that's it. We left it there because the other thing was totally unsustainable. But overall, I would say it's an incredible mod, even for someone who doesn't like or follow Formula 2, like me. I think it's enjoyable, I think it is, and once again I have to say that the folks at VRC have done a spectacular and incredible job, so that's it. Also, if anyone was thinking about getting it, I hope this gives you a bit more information about everything it contains. I hope you like it, and in that case, I appreciate as always a good like, comments, and on my part, that's all from me. We'll see each other in the next one.